Ma tõesti täna olen siin, et
Today I'm here
jagada sellist mõtisklust.
to share my thoughts with you. It includes both research, my personal experience, other people's experiences. So we will, which I have seen, or which I have then connected. And I have been dealing with this topic of complexity in my research work. And, well, I also defended my PhD last year in the Tallinn University. I've been dealing with social work throughout all levels of education. So today, I would like to ask you to think on a more theoretical platform. When I was preparing for today, I remembered a story. It was a family trip we made maybe about 10 years ago. We were walking in town and we were waiting for the bus in the parking lot to go back to the hotel. It was a large group of people. There were children playing in the parking lot. There were kittens around, children were running around and falling, as they do. And then one father said to their child, "If you don't stop this running, I will hit you." I was standing next to him. And actually, I froze. It was so unexpected. I couldn't do anything. Such a thing hadn't happened before. Well, then, time passed, and later on, it just felt strange saying something. But what does it mean? Well, we as human beings, we are very complex systems. We have these invisible networks intervening our lives. There are different events, different people in our lives that make us think or act in a certain way. I come from a childhood where violence was unheard of. My father also discussed the meaning of words such as stupid or fool when we used these, when we were angry. So maybe with this father, this was the first time when I was actually standing close to violence. We might say that we as humans are similar, but we are also very different. We have different childhoods, we have different history. We have a lot of empathy, but we also have a lot of secrets that have made us who we are today. When I was preparing for today, I also remembered a story from a foster or a child protection service or a foster home where I was working as an instructor. And one evening they brought us 3 children from a home where they had been beaten. They were all very small. And I remember there was a 5-year-old boy who kept on hitting and kicking his siblings. We tried to tell him that violence is not acceptable. This is not how you act. But how could a child understand this when he comes from a home where he has bruises, where his 10-month-old sister has bruises? How can we tell him that violence is not acceptable? He sees the world from a very different perspective. So for some times I have been passionate about how there are no simple solutions. I feel that when we try to achieve simple solutions, then this is what gets us into trouble when it comes to domestic violence. I have some stories here to share with you. So these stories, 2 stories I will share with you, come from a cooperation project we had with the Victim Support Service and the police. So we conducted the project together with them, and these stories come from there. So this is the story of Janne. So police was reported that a child had been violent against her mother. Mom said that Janne was acting aggressively. Police had been reported of 82 cases about Janne in 2 years' time, 8 criminal proceedings, 13 misdemeanor proceedings. Child protection specialist said that Janne felt a sense of hopelessness. There were many specialists working with her. There were therapists, child protection workers, different support specialists, psychiatrists. So there were many people helping her. However, Janne said that she was tired of all of this. When we put together this story based on the information from different databases, we got a different picture. We could see that in this family, violence had been present throughout generations. Already in 2006, since Janne was born, police had been reported of different cases. Neighbors had called the police because the child was crying. The mother had been beating the child and later telling the police that, this was her way of raising the child. We also found out that Janne's mother had been a victim of domestic violence. Her mother had been violent at home. So, of course, this is a simplified version of the story. It was actually a multi-layered story. The mother's partner abused alcohol, and Janne also became abusive towards her mother. So this was the aftermath of what had happened before. And here we have another story. Oh, it's not working. Okay, here we are. This is the story of Gert and Marika. And this is a story about how violence escalates in time, as we have seen before as well. The story starts when Marika's mother calls the police and says how her daughter's partner beats her daughter. The police goes to the family 1 week later. By this time, the situation has calmed down, and Marika is dissatisfied with the fact that the police didn't come earlier. In March 2017, somebody who was running, doing sports, noticed that there was a car in a parking lot where a girl was shouting, "Don't do it!" And there were two partners fighting. And then in October 2017, Gert was strangling Marika, telling her that he would kill her. Also here, the mother reported the attack against her daughter. Police was called several times in a short time period. There were many reports to the police in 2017. In the end, the man was driving around with Marika and he was raping her in the car. So Marika ended up with the victim support specialist, but then lost contact with the specialist. So there are many different stories. But I would like to speak about the complexity in these stories. I think all people who work in the field of domestic violence know this. But I think what's important to understand here that focusing on simple solutions might have disastrous consequences. In Janne's story, we could see that, this violence against her mother was actually caused by past events. We can see that in domestic violence there are many situations that are unexpected, and it's difficult to see how this thing is going. So when we work with these stories, we have to keep this in mind. We can see how different values, different understandings, different things kind of meet in practice, and this is what makes this work so challenging. Domestic violence is dynamic and changes in time. We might know things, But do we notice this kind of thing in practice as well? The harmful effect of domestic violence is not this single occurrence. It's not a single attack, a single word, but it's a set of incidents that makes domestic violence insufferable. In my presentation today, I would like to focus on 3 terms. So first, social complexity, second, complex thinking, and third, transdisciplinarity. They might be familiar to you, but I think it's a good idea to go over them once again. But before going there, I would like to invite you to think what kind of terms do we use when we speak about domestic violence. We know that we create our understanding of the world based on the words that we use. So here we can see different definitions. And you can also see these here. So we speak about violence against women, domestic violence, gender-based violence. This is also then called domestic violence. So violence against women is any type of gender-based physical, sexual and psychological abuse, regardless of the setting. Domestic violence is any type of violence in the family, in a domestic setting. Gender-based violence is violence against women. Why is it important to have a closer look at the terms? Because here we have the chance to help the people who are victims of a certain type of violence. The victims of violence against women need to be helped according to the violence that they have experienced. But we hear this argument oftentimes that, men also experience violence, that men are also victims of violence. Yes, we have seen studies that show that the experience is similar, but when we have a look at the questions being asked, then only certain types of violence were being asked about. So, for example, physical violence. They say that domestic violence can't be dealt with outside its context, outside the domestic setting. We often ask ourselves, how does this happen that Estonia is the country with the highest level of domestic violence in Europe? So we have some narratives here that we could consider. First, we have to agree on the fact that we live in the urge of diversity. Diversity is increasing in our society, and there are no easy solutions, no solutions that fit everybody. We live in a diverse environment, people have longer lives. We have seen how more and more people have mental health issues since early childhood. This also means that people that we help in our everyday lives are very diverse. We need to solve complex issues. We are being faced with questions, are they as good as we are? Are the people who wear masks are as dignified as the ones that aren't? There are a lot of discussions where we have this us and them opposition and confrontation. People are pointing fingers at each other. This is how we restrict our opportunities to help people. They say that the age that we live in is super diverse. This means diversity inside diversity. This means that we have victims of violence who have special needs, who are of a different nationality, might have a different color of skin, or they might be on the search of their sexual identity. This means that we need to be ready to help different people. Are we ready to do that today? This means that every story that we see might seem simple at the first glance. However, when we look deeper, we see this diversity that poses challenges. So diversity or super diversity is the new norm. Some other narratives. So, something we always speak about is blaming the survivors. So, survivors experience stigma, self-stigma, they feel shame. They ask themselves, is this thing that I am undergoing serious enough to look for help? Making the victim responsible for their suffering might come from this neoliberal society that we have had here in Estonia. So what does it mean? Well, actually, neoliberalism is an economic theory. But one way how neoliberalism has shaped our society is that we place the responsibility on a person. We expect people to phrase their goals. We expect people to take responsibility for themselves, to find their way in the society, and also to look for help when they are in need. So each and every one of us is responsible for their own success or failure. It was only last week when I noticed when a writer and a yoga instructor was collecting stories from older men, saw how there was this one respondent who attacked her sexually. Luckily, she managed to escape, but she posed a question to herself: how did I energetically attract these people who could attack me? Also, an example from my personal life. In spring, me and my family, we all got COVID, and we felt strained physically and mentally. So I had to take a 5-week holiday from work. I noticed how I kept on asking from myself, so how did I cause this? I felt ashamed for being, stressed. And I noticed how I placed the responsibility on myself. So this sense that, everyone is solely responsible for their own life, this is so present in our society. It's a very complex matter. Of course, this doesn't mean that people don't have to take responsibility, but we shouldn't forget about people who are not capable of taking responsibility at some point in their lives. Luckily, I was able to get help from specialists, and I hope that I can leave this part of my life behind now. So this might be one thing. Another interesting notion, something that I have noticed before, I haven't studied it academically, but I have seen music videos that are popular. So that has made me ask, is there a romantic side to domestic violence? I have noticed music videos of free male artists where family violence, domestic violence, seems to be part of a romantic relationship. So the couple is violent and then they end up, making up and kissing passionately. As specialists of domestic violence, we actually know that this is the circle of domestic violence. So this is how we become desensitized towards violence. I mean, with these videos, we show young people that, this is how relationships work. You have an argument, you throw things at each other, and then you make up and kiss, and this is normal. Or people who have ended up in these support systems show that, this organization of different types of support is fragmented. I mean, from Janne's story, we could see that there were 5 different types of specialists surrounding her. So there's a lack of coordination. When the mental health services directed towards children were analyzed in Estonia, we could see that there were 99 different mental health services for children and 74 services for children and their parents. So there are many specialists, but this means that we don't see the person as a whole. However, this increases social vulnerability. In spring, I asked myself, if I feel mentally down, should I turn to a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist? I mean, who could help me? Luckily, I had a good social network. Also, in the recent times, there have been many articles about domestic violence where the focus is on how it's difficult to get help, and if you end up in this support system, you feel like you are being raped for the second time, that the ones who actually get help are lucky. I feel that we have many specialists who are not engaged. And we have people like that working in the medical field, in the police. But, I mean, we still turn to them if we are in need. So I think that when we publish articles like that, we send a message to the victim. You know, there's no point in reporting your problem because you will be raped again, so to say. I think that we need to think about domestic violence instances as social complex systems. In every story, there are many factors that are connected to each other. There's this invisible network. This means that there are no simple solutions. This means that we need to look at every story as a network of different factors. The relationships between people change in time. People are connected to each other inside a family. They also communicate to other families, other people. They read articles in newspapers. They are like sponges who have absorbed this way of thinking that, you know, maybe I am guilty. The relationships between people are non-linear. We know that when working with domestic violence, victims tend to go back to the abuser maybe 7 or 8 times before they finally make up their mind. We know there's this butterfly effect here. This means that small changes can bring about a disaster. One unanswered call, one cold glance might make the people, go away, not search for help, and this might, cost them their lives. When we try to make complex things simple, this doesn't help. When we analyze single factors, that doesn't help. So what do we need to consider? We need to consider that, we have different values meeting in these stories. Different specialists with different experiences, different training come together. And we can only create a unified platform when we actually speak to each other, not only exchange information, but really speak to each other. When we work with people, we need to examine their life. We need to empower them. That means that we need to use our intuition, and we need to reflect on a constant basis. Is the thing that I'm doing today the best way to deal with this issue? These are the questions that we as professionals constantly need to ask from ourselves. And this also means work with the people who are in a vulnerable position, the people surrounding them. We need to guide people, we need to encourage them, we need to include different specialists. We need a different way of thinking. We need a way of thinking that unifies and accepts this complexity. that unifies and doesn't stop, that accepts the fact that people have problems in different fields of life. We need to know that stories are often more complicated than they seem to be at the first glance. This means that we have to work not between different fields. This means that specialists from different fields need to create a new level of knowledge that's intended for this particular case. We need to put our knowledge together and then see how we can go on together. We need to create new knowledge. Today we can see that, cooperation tends to mean that people just exchange information. Indeed, we need to move from opposition to working together. We need to come out of the borders of our field and try and find solutions here in Estonia so that we would be available for women, girls, boys and men who need our help at some point. So this is it from me. Thank you. Thank you, Airi. Please stay here. We have several questions. Please, this is for you. So, I have a memory as well. I remember when I was working in the TV show Pealtnägija, when in the year 2010, and the stories of domestic violence started to come in. So women came and told us that, I have reported my husband 27 times and nothing has happened. I remember the Minister of Justice back then was Krister Michal, and he said that, domestic violence is a priority, and this resonated in the society, in the number of cases being proceeded increased. And I remember that on the one hand, the Minister of Justice said that this was a priority, and they told them, but they didn't tell the Minister of the Interior that, they should have more people working on these cases. So I remember that after that increase in the cases, every detective had about 30 or 40 domestic violence cases to proceed. So as a former criminal reporter, I find it very hard to believe that you really can, take every case very personally and analyze this and be emphatic. So has this changed? Does the state understand that you can't give 30 cases of domestic violence to one detective? Because, nowadays we have more of these stories than back in 2011. I think that my colleagues from the Police and Border Guard Board can answer the question about how the police work has been organized today. But I suppose the expectations for the specialists have increased, so we expect them to intervene quickly, emphatically, and as you said. And the key here is, how to prioritize these stories in your work. I think that when we have a 15-year-old boy smoking in a store, needs the same amount of attention as a 10-year-old boy who has experienced domestic violence in the middle of the night. So we need to prioritize the cases. And it's also about exchanging information. The specialist who hears these two stories being reported, they need to decide, okay, this is the place where I need to intervene quickly. If I were a specialist And I got information about this 10-year-old boy who is outside in the middle of the night. It's minus 15. He's wearing a T-shirt. He needs quick emotional support so that this event wouldn't haunt him for the rest of his life. So as specialists, I think we have this opportunity. And we need more specialists in every single field. I was more thinking that, maybe during this past 10 years, we have also learned to notice our own specialists, that they also need support. Maybe we need to give them extra staff, more time, maybe more time off. This should be a priority in every organization. They're meant to keep or to maintain their mental health. But I believe that these corona times have really brought focus on this mental health issue. And also we have said that, you have to recognize when you need help. During the pandemic, when we were dealing with people in crisis, then we and the Victim Support Service organized different specialists going to different organizations and hold discussions with the staff. And sometimes people who are specialists, doctors, police officers, they might think that, do I have the right to feel tired, burned out? It's not easy to ask for help or accept help. Okay, we have several questions. So we have a question that received 3 likes. So if you were in the same situation in this parking lot, how would you act now? I would get involved. I would speak to this father. With public intervention, the question is whether you should, get involved in the same place in the parking lot, but because we were staying at the same hotel, I could have done it later. Because if it's a person who likes power, then this public shaming might not be a solution, because that might give them more power. But I would get involved, because this might give this little boy, the message that, there is help out there. The next question, how does the system or how does this time that we have here support simple solutions? Well, I am a researcher and I know that this is a complex problem, but of course this doesn't help anybody. But we have to implement this way of thinking, that we need to think about we need to think in a holistic manner. We need to bring out the connections between different walks of life. Because when we make these connections transparent, for example, when we were speaking about the abolition of abortion, then with my friend and with my acquaintances, we spoke about it a lot. We spoke about the connections, and people usually get your point when you bring out these connections. But we need to take more time to have deep conversations. And then another question. As a policymaker, when you start your work on a daily basis, what do you do so that people would take this complexity of domestic violence into account? Can you give us a specific example? On a daily basis, I cooperate with my colleagues from different walks of life. We communicate a lot. We discuss different topics very passionately, for example, different articles. We discuss different perspectives. We organize conferences, carry out different projects. We include and combine specialists from different fields into a single activity. And we have also failed at times. Thank you for this presentation, for your answers. There are more questions, but as time is our enemy, then I'm sure that you can have a look at these questions later and also answer them. So thank you for your active participation. This is very important. Airi, thank you.